What if I told you that one of history's most famous explorers might never have reached his destination? Marco Polo claimed he traveled to China and met the great Kublai Khan. But did he really make this epic journey? Marco Polo's story has some strange gaps that make experts wonder. Think about when you visit a new restaurant. You remember specific details, right? The smell of the food, the color of the walls, maybe how crowded it was. These little details prove you were really there. But Marco Polo's book is missing key details about China. He never mentions the Great Wall of China. This massive wall was already built when he supposedly visited. How could someone miss a wall that stretches for thousands of miles? He also doesn't talk about Chinese tea drinking. Tea was everywhere in China during his time. Every Chinese person drank tea daily. It was like coffee in America today. Yet Marco Polo never describes this important part of Chinese culture. Even stranger, he doesn't mention chopsticks. Imagine visiting Japan and never talking about sushi, or going to Italy and not mentioning pasta. Chopsticks were used by everyone in China. They were as common as forks and knives in Europe. Marco Polo also skips over Chinese writing. Chinese characters look completely different from European letters. Any European visitor would find this fascinating. They would definitely write about it. But Marco Polo's book barely mentions how different Chinese writing looks. These missing details are like puzzle pieces that don't fit. When someone really visits a place, they notice the unusual things. They remember what made that place special and different from home. Some historians think these gaps are too big to ignore. If Marco Polo really spent years in China, wouldn't he mention these basic parts of daily life? It's like someone claiming they lived in New York, but never mentioning skyscrapers or yellow taxis. What do you think? Are these missing details just forgotten memories, or signs that something isn't right with his story? The Chinese kept detailed records of everything, but Marco Polo isn't mentioned anywhere. Imagine you're the manager of a big company. You write down every important meeting. You keep records of all your employees. You track every major business deal. This is exactly how the Chinese government worked in Marco Polo's time. The Chinese were amazing record keepers. They wrote down the names of foreign visitors. They tracked important government officials. They even recorded what people ate at royal dinners. Their records from that time period still exist today. But here's the problem. Marco Polo claimed he worked for Kublai Khan for 17 years. He said he was an important government official. He even claimed he was the governor of a Chinese city. These would be huge jobs for a foreigner, yet Chinese records from that time don't mention him at all. Not once. There's no Marco Polo in any government document, no foreign official with his description, no record of any European working for the Khan during those years. This silence is very strange. The Chinese wrote about other European visitors. They mentioned Christian missionaries who came to China. They recorded meetings with foreign traders. They even wrote about European gifts given to the emperor. Think about it this way. If a foreign person became the governor of your city, wouldn't that be big news? Wouldn't newspapers write about it? Wouldn't there be official records? The same logic applies to Marco Polo's claims. Some historians argue that records could have been lost. Wars and time destroy documents, but the Chinese records from that period are actually very complete. We have detailed information about many other people from the same time. The lack of Chinese evidence is like a detective story with missing clues. If Marco Polo was really important in China, where are the Chinese sources to prove it? Much of Marco Polo's book sounds like stories he heard from other people. When you tell friends about your vacation, you share personal experiences. You talk about what you saw and did. You don't just repeat what other tourists told you about their trips, but Marco Polo's book is filled with stories that sound secondhand. Many of his descriptions match earlier travel books written by other people. Some of his personal experiences are almost identical to older Persian and Arab travel accounts. For example, Marco Polo describes certain Indian customs and Persian trade routes. His descriptions are very similar to books written 100 years before he was born. It's as if he copied information from existing travel guides. Marco Polo also gets some basic facts wrong about places he claims to have visited. He describes Japan as being much closer to China than it really is. He talks about certain cities that didn't exist during his lifetime. These errors suggest he was working from incomplete or outdated information. Think about how this might happen. Imagine Marco Polo sitting in a Middle Eastern trading post. He meets merchants who have been to China. They tell him amazing stories about Chinese cities, customs, and the emperor's court. He writes these stories down as if they were his own experiences. This was actually common in medieval times. Many travel books were collections of stories from different sources. Writers combined their own limited travels with tales from other merchants and explorers. They created exciting adventure stories for European readers who had never left their home countries. Marco Polo might have traveled partway to Asia. He probably reached places like Constantinople or perhaps even Persia. But he could have gathered most of his information about China from other travelers in these Middle Eastern cities. This would explain why his book has such detailed information about some topics, but misses obvious details about daily Chinese life. He had good second-hand information, but lacked personal experience. Does this make Marco Polo a liar, or just a clever storyteller working with the information available to him? Marco Polo could have learned about China without going there because of how trade worked. Think about how news spreads in your neighborhood. One person sees something interesting. They tell their friends. Those friends tell other people. Soon, everyone knows the story, even people who weren't there when it happened. The Silk Road worked the same way with information. It wasn't just one road from Europe to China. It was a network of many different trade routes. Merchants, goods, and stories moved along these paths in both directions. Most traders didn't travel the entire distance from Europe to China. Instead, they worked like a relay team. A European merchant might travel to Constantinople. There, he would meet a Persian trader. The Persian had goods from an Arab merchant. The Arab had traded with someone from India. The Indian trader had connections in China. Each person along this chain collected information. They learned about distant places, customs and rulers. They heard stories about amazing cities and strange animals. All of this knowledge got passed from trader to trader. Marco Polo's father and uncle were merchants who used these trade networks. They had already made one trip toward Asia before Marco joined them. They had connections with Middle Eastern traders who knew about China. Marco Polo could have gathered incredible amounts of information about China without ever leaving the Middle East. In cities like Baghdad, Constantinople, or Samarkand, he could have met dozens of people who had first-hand knowledge of Chinese customs, geography, and politics. This explains how Marco Polo's book could be so detailed about some aspects of China while missing others. He had access to good commercial and political information through trading networks. But he lacked the personal, everyday observations that come from actually living in a place. The medieval world was more connected than we often think. Information traveled vast distances through these trading relationships. A smart person with good connections could learn about faraway places without making the full journey. Could Marco Polo have been an excellent reporter who compiled information from the world's best trade network? So did Marco Polo reach China? The evidence suggests he might not have. Missing cultural details, absent Chinese records, second-hand information, and the medieval trading system all point to a different story. Marco Polo was probably a skilled writer who collected amazing information about China from other travelers. His book became famous not because it was a true personal account, but because it was an exciting adventure story that captured people's imaginations. What's your opinion? Did Marco Polo make it to China? Or was he history's most successful writer? Like this video, leave a comment and subscribe for more historical mysteries.